TV blared to life on its own, tuned to Don't Look Now, a film we'd never watch. Then the cabinets flew open, the toilet paper unspooled, and the remote vanished, only to be found buried in the cat's litter box. But the real horror began when we checked into La Posada's ghost room, and the dead woman who hated cigars made sure we smelled her rage. This story actually begins in my Seattle home, a 1926 structure, which my husband and I have lived in for over 5 years. There have been occasional cabinet door openings and front door openings which we attributed to house settling. One evening in March of 2000, my husband and I went out to dinner with some friends and came home feeling very sleepy. My husband went upstairs to our bedroom and was lighting some incense when I came up. I hopped into bed, and the moment I hit it, the television came on. My surprised husband looked up and asked if I had turned it on. I pointed to the remote control over on his nightstand and told him I had not. I asked if he had done it manually, and he had not. Even stranger, the channel was not the same one we had been watching the night before, but was a movie channel playing what I consider to be the scariest movie of all time, Don't Look Now, 1973. I started watching the movie, but he was clearly agitated. Frankly, I thought he was playing some sort of practical joke on me, but he wouldn't let the subject drop. He went downstairs to get a glass of water and yelled for me to come downstairs. He asked why I had opened all of the cabinet doors. Indeed, all of the cabinets in the living room were wide open. I had been the last one to come upstairs, so naturally I thought he was playing some sort of trick on me. I sat down and told him I was very tired and not in the mood, but he was clearly very frightened and not playing a joke. We surmised that someone must be in the house and became panicked. We quickly decided to search the house. I followed him and popped open the bathroom door. All the toilet paper was unraveled. He went straight to the guest bedroom and put his hand on the door knob, which promptly fell to the ground. Then he went to the basement, where he felt a cold chill shoot through him. He ran back upstairs to the main floor and was white as a sheet. Seeing that there was nobody in our house, we went back upstairs to our room. The TV was still on, but I could not find the remote. We looked for about 10 minutes, but couldn't find it. Then when we started to walk out of the bedroom, a metal glint caught my husband's eye. Poking out of the sand in the litter box was the remote control. This was a terrifying night for us, and nothing has happened since, but it prompted us to look into the cause of these happenings. I decided to make reservations at La Posada in Santa Fe, New Mexico, because I had remembered from years ago on some Unsolved Mysteries show that it was purported to be haunted. I called the hotel and asked for the ghost room. They gave it to me and told me I was free to switch if I needed to. To make this long story a bit less long, nothing much happened for the first 2 days we were there. I was sleeping very poorly, but was determined to stick it out. My husband and my parents, who were with us, went downstairs to a library in the old Victorian hotel, which had once housed a prominent merchant and his family in the late 1800s. The wife, Julia, died after a long bout with depression at the turn of the century. It was rumored that she was insane and was chained to her bed during the last year of her life. Anyhow, Julia apparently also hated cigar smoke. We all played cards and smoked cigars. When a waitress came by our table, she tripped, spilling beer all over my father. My husband went upstairs to get him a towel and ran back down within a minute or so. He told us to go up to the room and was very excited. He went off to get the night manager, and we went up. When I entered the room, I knew what had made him so excited. The room was absolutely reeking of rose-based perfume. It was so thick, I could barely breathe. Soon several staff members came up to check the vents, which went to the roof, and to see what had happened. I don't even own any perfume, so I knew it wasn't anything in our luggage. The door was locked and no staff. Members had come in since making the room up that morning. We had been in since. The rest of the trip was uneventful, but the night of the perfume was all anyone at the hotel talked about until we left. I don't know if the two nights are related. They happened about a month apart and were my first and last experiences with what might be interpreted as ghosts. The Air Force never briefed us on what lurked in the radar station's dead zone. That winter night, something tapped me on the shoulder, hard, deliberate, but when I spun around, the frozen air was empty, and the security cameras showed only me. I was in the Air Force back in the late 80s. I was stationed at Scott Air Force Base in Illinois as an air traffic control radar tech. I worked the graveyard shift most of my tour there, and upon arrival, I always felt uncomfortable going to our ASR Airport Surveillance Radar site alone at night. I always felt watched when I was alone there at night and outside the shelter. In order to get into the compound, I had to stop my truck and unlock the gate. Once open, I would drive through and stop the truck and then close the gate again. This particular night was in the winter of 88-89. It was extremely cold that night and I had on a very thick Air Force issue parka. If memory serves, it was in the low teens. I pulled up to the site and stopped the truck in front of the gate. Once I got out of the truck, I immediately felt watched. Actually, when I was inside the truck, I didn't feel a whole lot better. I unlocked the gate and swung it open. I drove the truck into the compound and got out to close the gate. I grabbed the left side, which swung onto a small grassy field, and pulled it closed. Then I grabbed the right side, which swung onto a wooded area. I hated getting that one because the feeling was always stronger there. I pulled that closed and latched the gate. As I walked back to the truck, I felt two strong and distinct taps on my left shoulder, like someone trying to get my attention. I jumped and did a 180 while in the air. There was nothing, no one behind me. I don't know if I was relieved or disturbed by that fact. I got in the truck and drove right up to the door of the shelter. I went inside and didn't come out until I knew the sun was up. Although the feelings of being watched and a newly increased sense of uneasiness continued, I never had any more experiences. I hated even more going up there at night, but it was better than getting slapped with dereliction of duty. I talked to some of the guys in my shop about it. None would admit to any odd feelings up there. It was suggested that it was a bat that I felt. If it was a bat, it had to have hit pretty hard for me to feel it through my parka. If that was the case, I think I would have heard it due to the close proximity of my ear to my shoulder. Also, I'm no zoologist, but I think it was a little cold for bats. Anyway, I put up with the ribbing about my haint, and I didn't argue when I got moved to day shift. This encounter happened to my mother-in-law about 17 years ago. My husband was a builder for the local council in a town in Scotland. While working one day on a site that had recently been cleared, he found an old necklace. Being in the renovations side of council work, it was fairly common to find things and take them home. He gave the necklace to his mother. She was delighted and took a few hours to clean the jewelry. When it was cleaned, she wore it. The pendant was rather large and solid in the shape of a cross, and the chain was also large. There were no special markings on the cross, no stones or carvings, and my mother-in-law quite liked it. Now, as all good ghost stories go, everything was fine until she went to bed that night. During the night, she had a terrible nightmare of an old crone trying to strangle her. The old lady had a frantic look about her and was clawing at her neck as if she wanted the necklace. The more the struggle went on, the harder my mother-in-law found it to breathe. My father-in-law woke up to find his wife choking and clawing at the air as if fighting someone off. When he turned on the light, he could see the chain of the necklace had been twisted round and round until it had tightened around his wife's neck. As he went back toward the bed, the chain was still twisting and the cross had been bent out of shape. In a panic, he reached for the chain to stop it from twisting, and his wife let out a huge scream and lunged at him. She screamed so loud she woke herself up. The strangest thing about this was the cross was so bent out of shape that it looked like a blob of metal, and no one could see where the edges of the cross had been. It was just one hunk of silver. Needless to say, poor old father-in-law had to return it that night to the place where it was found. My mother-in-law still to this day will not talk about this and just says it was a silly dream. But how bad a dream was it when you make your husband drive 8 miles in the middle of winter at 3:30 a.m. to bury a piece of jewelry that was no longer recognizable as such?